You can tell a website that looks slick from one that looks a bit homemade, but can you identify exactly what it is that separates high and low quality web design? We're going to review some examples to demonstrate that often it's the way they use type. Typography might just be the most important skill for a web designer to learn, so by the end of this short video, I'll make sure you avoid the most common mistakes. This alone will put your work ahead of 80% of all websites. I've just made that stat up, but from what I've seen, it's probably true. Let me show you the problem and then how the pros do it. So what do you notice first of all about this site? Try to take each one in and figure out what's wrong with it. Well, type-wise, we have the navigation here going down onto a second line, which is kind of strange. Obviously, we've got this strange layout where above this line, we've got this image in the background and then a video underneath. It's an odd composition. I mean, we can actually change the size of this window. We can see how this black type over this background image becomes illegible. So there's not sufficient contrast here. As we begin to scroll down, we get into this longer paragraph here. And there's a few things going on. One is that, again, the type is set on an image. So it makes it not very legible, even though this image has gone to like kind of washed out with like a white overlay or a low opacity. It's still difficult to read. And then when we have the red type on the image, it becomes even more difficult. We also have center alignment. Now, it's not wrong to center align type, but it's not good to overuse that. It kind of a formality. It's okay for very short sections, but for a longer type like this that you want people to read, you want to have a steady left alignment, because then people can always bring their eye back to the same point on each line. And also having the rag on both sides, see where the end of the lines finish at different points, that just makes it look messy and not as tidy. So the typesetting of this could be tidied up. Then as we go into this next section, we have these reviews, and we're now using a different font. We have got different font sizes, like this first one versus this third one. They're clearly smaller on the right here. It's in all capitals, which makes it more difficult to read in a longer paragraph. So we just don't need this variation. And there's odd things going on here. Lots of different type sizes. You don't want to use too many type sizes. We've also got this huge line height here, the leading, where there's these big spaces in between each line of the address, which is not cool. So I feel a bit like I'm picking on these little local businesses. So what I've tried to do is pick businesses that all look like great businesses. They just need help with their website. So if you need help with your fire protection in the northeast of England, check these guys out. But how can we do this well? So let's look at another business-to-business site, but that does typography with excellence. And this is the website for Coviso, who make these fabrics. And straight away, we can see a night and day difference. There is a really deliberate alignment of everything. We've got things aligned over on the left here, or the navigation, all on this one line. That really makes it clear. Things are the correct size. There's a sense of scale. We have this huge headline here, and it makes for a much nicer layout because there's the scale of the small type to make this feel huge. And we read this first. There's enough contrast with white type on a dark background. So this makes it a lot easier to begin with. And as we scroll through the site, this sort of excellence continues. We have this time paragraphs are left aligned with the rag on the right. In each panel, we have enough contrast. The type is either set on a solid color background or on an image that has sufficient contrast and not too much detail within it. And there is all the way through this nice sense of scale with these huge headlines and then this appropriately sized paragraphs. Here, the typesetting is much better. We have the correct line height, the space in between each line vertically. We have the right sort of measure, the line length, so there's not too many words in a line. You want to look at like 50 to 70 characters, maybe 8 to 12 words in a line is a good sort of length here for a line, not too long. and this really helps us to read it. And all the way through this site, there's a really good use of alignment, really good choice of fonts, and all the way through, they've sort of just stuck to fundamentals and make sure that things are done with detail. And this is just the care that a professional takes as opposed to throwing something into a template. Let's have a look at it on mobile as well. We have the same issues with layout at the top. I can't even see the navigation. Oh, it's this really thin crosshair here is a plus, and I have to click on that to get to the navigation. So there wasn't sufficient contrast there. And again, we have this center aligned type and all these different colors, these parts in red, just make it really difficult to read. And again, with the reviews, now they're even thinner in the middle. I'm going to have to zoom in perhaps to read these, which is not a good user interface. It needs to be optimized better for mobile. Obviously, all these logos are crammed on top of one another, and the alignment and type sizes and line height are still off in the footer. If we go to the Carvico site, the layout has been adapted for mobile, but it still works in the same way, where we have the headline aligned to that bottom left, and it just makes for a pleasing composition. There's enough negative space around it, and all the way through. These are pretty short lines here. You wouldn't normally have a line this short, but it's because it's an about copy, they kind of get away with it because it's like a stylistic choice for us to read that first part. And then as you get into the meat of the website, they do go to a smaller point size for the fonts, and that allows for more words on each line. But every panel that I go to, the type here is legible, it's nice to read, there's sufficient contrast, it's well set, and it just makes me want to carry on scrolling and carry on viewing each of these panels and actually take in the content that is here. Next, let's go to a B2C, business to consumer website, and have a look at a couple of bridal websites. So this website here for a company in Canada, again, we have a strange composition going on because we have this box along the top here, which goes to the full width, but then we have these box underneath, and these sort of compete, and I don't know how these are supposed to work together. We have this script logo. Now, without getting too much into typing logos, I'm not a big fan of script fonts. I love hand-drawn calligraphy when a skilled illustrator or designer is doing that. But in this sort of font where you're seeing like the D's are identical, but it's kind of supposed to be, I'm just not a fan, but that's maybe a little bit of personal preference there. But as we get through to the site, we see with the font, we've got a lot of fonts that are embedded within images. Now, I appreciate on these images that are scrolling, some of these might be logos, they might come from the supplier. But for example, on this panel here, there's far too many going on, and there appears to be like myriad at the bottom there. So there's too much type going on, different fonts. And then we have this by appointment only graphic here. And if I actually try and click and drag this, you can see that's actually an image. It's not plain text, which is not good for accessibility, and it is not good for search indexing. So that's definitely something you don't want to do. If possible, use HTML text and, overlay that in your image or set it in your website. Don't make images of type. And it just introduces another font completely unnecessarily. And here, this is definitely their own little graphic here where it says discover our wedding gowns. And again, this let's use two different fonts just for this panel. And even though we've already got too many fonts going on with all the brand names and all the other things, they're just adding more and more in. Again, at the bottom, we've got two different fonts in this contact us today, and it's an image. So these are some best practices or that are not being applied, some worst practices maybe. In contrast, if we have a look at this website for Vivienne Westwood Bridal, the type is very simple and restrained, except for in the logo, because they know they have a complex logo with this custom type and the icon in the combination mark. So because of that, the rest of the type is very simple. They've even just moved all the menus and the icons right to the corner, which we might not always do. Usually on desktop, we'd want to see some options, but actually here, it's very much about heroing the work. So they want the rest of the user interface to be very minimal so that we can really see what we're here to see, the dresses. So they've decided to just use this simple sans serif font in small sizes and make sure that it stays out of the way. They have center aligned this paragraph copy here. I would prefer if they would find another way to do this layout, because I think it gets slightly long, but it's probably just about short enough to get away with this kind of thing. And occasional center alignment is absolutely fine. And it does have sufficient contrast here, being black and white. It's a good kind of line length. It's a legible font. So even though it's quite small on this big screen I'm looking at it on, it still works. But really what we're here to see is this imagery, is the clothing, is the dresses. And so the fact that these are the thing that we're getting to see, that's what we're here for, not all these big graphics, gowns and more. We don't need to see that. We just need a really small caption. And then that encourages to click through and see more of this particular dress. And here, once we get in here, we do have left aligned, rag on the right for the type here. And everything is just super simple, super aligned, but we're here because we want to see this beautiful clothing. And so it allows us to really focus on that, and it doesn't take away from it, whilst at the same time being accessible as well. On mobile, it's really the same story. These images are scrolling now, but we still have this issue with all this type that's embedded within it, and so many different fonts going on. The logo, then fonts on the graphic, then the fonts for the contact information, then by appointment only is another font. Then we have another point size here for repeating the phone number, even though it's just right there above. We have these same sort of graphics, and we're using this image when it really should be plain text. On the Vivienne Westwood Bridal Couture site, the same thing is followed. It actually looks probably even better on mobile. This time, the way the menu and the icons are used really makes sense, but we still get a real heroing of the work, of the designs, and we sort of get each one in view as we go through, and we can look at this beautiful work and really be drawn into the work itself and not be crowded out by the user interface. Next, let's get into a little bit of detail in typesetting. This website for Malton Hops, which is a brewery and a brew house in Australia, there's not things here that are glaringly bad. You know, this isn't a terrible choice of font for this kind of site. We've got basically black on white, so there's sufficient contrast in the color there. But we do have a few things going on. Again, we've got this center aligned type. For something this long, it would be a lot easier to read if it was left aligned. We also don't have any paragraphs like here. It feels like a little bit of spacing vertically would just really help us take in each separate part. I mean, you can say that when we make this window a little bit smaller, the line length, the measure becomes better, but you need to be able to design for all screen sizes, and this is not suitable. This whole layout, really, we need a little bit more scale going on, because we have the About Us titles maybe not large enough, although it does have some negative space around it, versus the size of the navigation, the type, then these badges, and everything's just sort of center aligned all the way through this page here. Maybe try one of the other pages. This is better because it's left aligned and we have paragraphs. So that's the first step that you could take. What else could we do here? Well, I would maybe tidy up the tracking, or also called letter spacing. So these letters to me look quite far apart, and I don't think we need quite that much space. So if we could bring the letter spacing in or across each line, that would just help it really come together, and then we'd be able to see what else we might need to do. But the rest of it is probably okay. It's probably all right. But if you want to see some real excellence when it comes to setting paragraphs like this, something like a list apart is a great example. So this article here, once we get into the meat of it, I'm not really sure actually about, you know, all these ads and the sidebar and this kind of thing, they are kind of a little bit distracting here. But once we get into the meat of this article, this is really beautifully typeset. So we have two fonts here. This is Georgia, I believe, for the body copy, and this looks like Franklin Gothic for these headlines. They work together. They're both classic fonts, but they have enough contrast between them so they're not too similar where they jar. So we have this bold sans serif and then a regular weight serif, and that's a nice combination. And this is really easy to read. It's a beautiful measure, the right line length, the right line height, good contrast for dark on light. The links are very clear, being in blue. And then we have these headlines that delineate the sections in this deep red, orangey red, the way the bullet points are set. So everything about this is just done very carefully, and it makes it easier to read this sort of long article. So this is a good example of excellence in typesetting and how to make sure that your longer paragraphs and longer articles will be read and the reader doesn't fatigue too quickly. On mobile, it's really the same story. With the Molten Hops website, we actually have an issue here where we've got a space on the right, and there must be some element. Yes, this Google map here is actually pushing out the interface, so the type appears really small at first. So you've got to sort of double click to bring that paragraph into view on your mobile browser. And it's a little bit easier to read here. But again, if we had it left aligned, if we had some paragraphs, that would probably be easier. Maybe we'll give them the chance to go to that other page, which was a little bit better. Yeah, I think maybe here, again, bring in the letter spacing, decrease the line height. But again, these guys look like a super cool business. I'd love to go and visit these guys in Australia or bring them to an event. So if you're in New South Wales, so we're not trashing local companies and small businesses. We just want to help you understand how we can really elevate, your web design and take it to the next level. With a list apart, it's even more of a joy really to read on mobile. Everything has been resized, so it really makes use of the screen size, making use of the width here on the phone, and still easy to read, something I would take the time to sit down with, which I maybe wouldn't if the typesetting was poor on another website. In our final set of examples, we have, first of all, Patio World. Again, we're still in New South Wales in Australia because I find all these websites on Google Maps. And what have we got going on here? What can you notice? There's quite a few things. I mean, layout wise and typography is about layouts too. We have a lot of medium-sized elements here. So there's not really a good hierarchy or a nice balance to the layout because we have all these sort of different sections. Imagine if you just block these out as rectangles, then they're all like these kind of medium size, and it really just doesn't lead us through the layout or create any sort of nice balance. We also have a lot going on because this is a very complicated, again, combination mark logo. Because of that, you need to think about how you deal with it, but not giving it enough negative space around it here, enough margin and breathing space is not smart. And then this family group of companies needing to include like 4 logos here, it just makes the thing super cluttered. And then with these fonts, they look very cheap, very generic looking. You want to go to a type foundry to pick your headline fonts if you really want it to look slick and professional. And this, just using all caps decorative font for a headline just makes it illegible. It makes it look ugly. It really doesn't work. We've also got too long a line length here, and then we end up with this one word on a line, something we want to avoid. And as we scroll through the site, we see more of these sort of sins. Again, this script type decorative font, it's very difficult to read this second line here. Some of the things you should think about when it's not scannable. Then we have center-aligned, like I say, you can use it occasionally, but using it with bullet points, this is just awful. Never do this. Your bullet point should be a straight line on the left. And again, because I've got this large screen and it's not been adapted for it, we've got super long line length. So it's like I'm watching tennis trying to read this website. Let's maybe contrast this with another site, which is the Rhode Island School of Design. And here, first of all, we have excellent font choices. The type choices here really work. We have this sans serif at the top for the navigation, which looks modern as well as elegant. And then we have this custom type here with a slab serif. You see, we've got these straight serifs at the terminals. And this is really interesting because it makes it look unique, because this is a design school. It makes it look like it's something that's crafted and custom and bespoke, but it's still very elegant, and it has a nod to something classic and tradition, but it feels modern at the same time because it's a serif, but it's a slab serif. That's really nice use of that. And again, with the composition, we've got this large headline that really is the one thing that we're going to be drawn to and that we're going to read from the beginning. Now, note that these guys also have a very complicated emblem. Did you see it? It's here in the bottom corner, and they have this custom script with their cipher and the full title of the school around it, founded in 1877. But they've been very clever with it, as opposed to the last site where they had that logo without enough margin around it, 4 other logos crammed in on there. They've given it plenty of breathing room. They've made it a bit smaller, and they've pushed it here to the bottom right so it doesn't dominate what they're doing. And that's what a smart client does. This is a design school. Most clients, they want their logo. It's their flag. They want to wave it. It's got to be bigger. It's got to be in the center or at the top. This is a smart choice here. As we scroll through the site, we can see actually the type, it actually animates these sections being cut out of the type to bring this interest, which is a really nice little touch. And then each part of this is just nicely set. We have the headlines in the slab serif, and then the links and the body copy in the sans serif. So again, a good serif and sans combination. Everything is done correctly. We've got the right line height, the spacing between each line, and we have sensible sort of use of scale. You know, if we were going to just click on any of these links at random, it's going to take us to a page where we've got exactly what we expect. Well set type, good measure, good use of scale throughout the site, and everything is aligned very purposefully. Whereas the last site, it felt a bit all over the place. Let's see what they look like on mobile. The Patio World site is somewhat cleaner here because the menu has all been hidden within this hamburger, but we still have these strange font choices. It looks like this type here in this main paragraph has not been properly aligned. And again, we have got this weird script font followed by bullet points that have been center aligned. There's no actual break between each of these bullet points, like an after paragraph spacing. So it makes us hard to delineate from one to the other. Going over to Rhode Island School of Design, once we close the cookies, again, we are led to that headline, and you're going to read that. So you're going to take in their offer, the thing that they want to communicate that is most important. You're getting that straight away. Now, this time, they've actually moved their emblem to the top left. So they've thought about where's the best position for it, because that wouldn't really work so well on the bottom right here. But they haven't felt the need, again, to make it too big. And as we scroll through, we get the same sort of layered effect, nice use of depth here. But we get a real sense of that they can handle typography in a very skilled way. There's good negative space. There's well set type all the way through. And that really gives us a more relaxing, a more pleasing feel. So we want to spend time on the site rather than being frustrated with it. Let me conclude by giving you some free resources, our complete guide to choosing fonts and a collection I put together entitled The Best Google Fonts for Every Mood. There are links to those ebooks in the description below. Until next time, happy designing.